This is one of my favorite childhood books called The House on East 88th Street. It was written and illustrated by Bernard Weber. And I'll tell you one reason I love the book so much is that I enjoyed it with my big brother, Lyle Green. This is me. I was about 4.5 years old, and I was growing up in Atlanta. I hope you love the story. This is the house on East 88th Street. It's empty now, but it won't be for long. Strange sounds come from the house. Can you hear them? Swish, swash, splash, swoosh. It began one sunny morning when the citywide storage and moving company truck pulled up to the house on East 88th Street and unloaded the belongings of Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Prim and their young son Joshua. It was a trying day for everyone. Mrs. Prim just could not decide where to put the piano, and Mr. Prim's favorite pipe was accidentally packed away in one of dozens of carts lying about. James and Hayes Weeks recently moved. They probably had lots of boxes too. Swish, swash, splash, swoosh. Loudly and clearly the sounds rumbled through the house. Oh, it's only a little thunder, Mrs. Prim assured everyone. And when a citywide storage and moving man carried in their potted pistachio tree, everyone rejoiced. The movers said that the truck was at last empty. They wished them well and hurried off on their next job for the day. Now I'm going to prepare lunch, announced Mrs. Prim. But first, I want to go upstairs and wash these grimy hands. Swish, swash, splash, swoosh. A puzzled Mrs. Prim stopped in her apron on moving day to listen. By and by, her ears directed her to the bathroom door. What can it be? She asked herself as she opened the door. What she saw made her slam it quickly shut. Mrs. Prim knew she was going to scream and just waited for it to happen, but she couldn't scream. She could scarcely even talk. The most Mrs. Prim was able to manage was a sharp, hoarse whisper of a voice she used to call Mr. Prim. Joseph, there's a crocodile in our bathtub. Mr. Prim looked into the bathroom. There is a crocodile in the bathtub. Oh, the next moment found them flying off in different directions. Help, help, Mrs. Prim cried out as she struggled with a window stuck with fresh paint. Operator, operator, Mr. Prim shouted into the telephone. Then he remembered that it was not yet connected. Joshua, who had heard everything, raced to the front door to be greeted there by an oddly dressed man who handed him a note. This will explain everything about the crocodile, said the man, leaving quietly but swiftly. Mr. Prim read the note. Please be kind to my crocodile. He is the most gentle of creatures and would not do harm to a flea. He must have tender, loving care. He is an artiste and can perform many good tricks. Perhaps he will perform some for you. I shall return. Cordially, look at his fancy signature, Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. P.S. That's a little note you add at the bottom of a letter. He will only eat Turkish caviar. And P.P.S. His name is Lyle, like my brother. Turkish caviar indeed, exclaimed Mrs. Prim. Ah, to think this could happen on East 88th Street. Whatever will we do with him? Suddenly, before anyone could think of a worthy answer, there was Lyle. Look at him. They're a little scared. And just as suddenly he got hold of a ball that had been lying among Joshua's belongings, and he began to balance it on his nose and to roll it down the notches of his spine. Now he was walking on his front feet, and he was taking flying flying leaps over the furniture. Woo! This is my favorite. Now he was twirling Joshua's hoop, doing it so expertly that the Prims just had to clap their hands and laugh. Lyle bowed appreciatively. He had won his way into their hearts and into their home. Later, Mrs. Prim was having a proper little tea party with a lady friend, and look what Lyle's doing. Every home should have a crocodile, said Mrs. Prim. Lyle is one of the family now. He loves helping out with the chores. He won't allow anyone else to carry out old newspapers to recycling or to bring in the milk. When I was little, the milk used to come from the dairy and they would leave it on the front porch. He folds towels, he feeds the bird, and when he sets the table, there is always a surprise. Look at him arranging flowers. I had only to show him once how to make a bed. People everywhere stopped to talk with Lyle. They said he is the most friendliest, nicest crocodile they have ever met. And Lyle likes to play in the park. He always goes around once in the pony cart. You guys would like to ride with Lyle, wouldn't you? And he has also learned to eat something besides Turkish caviar. He eats Italian ices, which are like snow cones. Lyle is a good sport. Everyone wants to play on his side. He is just wonderful company. We take him everywhere. Just give him his Turkish caviar and his bed of warm water, and he is just as happy as a bird. Look, there he's eating his fancy food, and he has some special towels with a fancy L for Lyle. One day, a brass band paraded past the house on East 88th Street. The Prim family rushed to the window. They called for Lyle, but there was no answer. Look, someone pointed out. It's Lyle. He's in the parade. There was Lyle doing his specialty somersault, flying leaps, walking on front and taking bows, just as he did the first day they had laid eyes on him. The people watching cheered him on while Lyle smiled back and blew them kisses, and a photographer was on hand to take photographs. The next day, Lyle was positively famous. The telephone rang continually and bundles of mail were dropped by the door. One letter was from someone Lyle knew particularly well, and Mr. Prim read it. Just a few words to say, I shall return. Cordially, Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. P.S. Very soon. P.P.S. To fetch my crocodile. There's Lyle wearing an apron in the kitchen. Several days later, Mrs. Prim and Lyle were in the kitchen shelling peas when they heard a knock at the door. It was Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. I have come for Lyle, announced Signor Valenti. Oh, you can't have Lyle, cried Mrs. Prim. He is very happy living here. We love him dearly. Lyle must be returned to me, insisted Signor Valenti. Was it not I who raised him from young crocodilehood? Was it not I who taught him his bag of tricks? We have appeared together on stages the world over. But why then did you leave him alone in a strange house? Asked Mrs. Prim. Because, answered Signor Valenti, I could no longer afford to pay for his Turkish caviar. But now Lyle is famous, and we shall be very rich. Mrs. Prim was saddened, but she knew Lyle properly belonged to Signor Valenti, and she had to let him go. It was a tearful parting for everyone. Mrs. Prim crying in her handkerchief. Little Joshua hugging him. Signor Valenti had such big plans for Lyle. They were to travel far and wide. They were to stay in many grand hotels, where sometimes the bathtubs were too big, sometimes they were too small, or too crowded. Signor Valenti knew what he could do to coax a smile for Lyle. He tried making funny faces at him. Look at Lyle. He tried standing on his head. He tickles his toes. And he told him uproarious stories that in happier days would have had Lyle doubled over with laughter. But Lyle could not laugh, nor could he make people laugh. He made them cry instead. One night in Paris, he made an entire audience cry. The theater manager was furious, and he ordered them off of the stage. Meanwhile, at the house back on East 88th Street, Mrs. Prim went about her work without her usual brightness, and deep sighs could be heard coming from behind the newspaper Mr. Prim was reading. There was his little picture, his empty chair. Every morning, Joshua anxiously awaited the arrival of the mailman in hope of receiving word from Lyle. And one morning, a letter did come. He knew the handwriting very well. Just a few words to say, "We shall return. Cordially, Hector P. Valenti, former star of stage and screen." Former means used to be. P.S. I am sick of crocodiles. P.P.S. and the tears of crocodiles. Hello, Liam. Not too many days after the Prims were delighted to find Hector P. Valenti and Lyle at their door. "Here, take him back," said Signor Valenti. "He is no good. He will, Liam, off. He will never make anyone laugh again." But Signor Valenti was mistaken, very much mistaken. Everyone laughed, and in the end, so did Signor Valenti. So now, if you should happen to be walking past the house on East 88th Street, and sounds go swish, swash, splash, swoosh, don't be surprised. It's only Lyle. Lyle the crocodile, flying a kite, always finding fun. I love you all, and I hope you loved my story, and there are more Lyle stories if you would like to hear them.